Good evening, I'm John Fugelsang, and this is Viewpoint. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. When it comes to gay people, the Catholic Church kind of likes to paraphrase St. Augustine and say it loves the sinner, hates the sin. That's what it likes to say, while labeling what is called homosexual acts as depraved and intrinsically disordered, leading the fight against same-sex marriage, and since 2005, barring men with, quote, deep-seated homosexual tendencies, end quote, from the priesthood. And it's really no wonder so many gay Catholics feel rejected by their own church. But some in the church have a very different message.
If you are an LGBT Catholic or an LGBT ally, the chances are right now in our church you are feeling unsupported, you're feeling rejected, abandoned, and even unloved. But I want you to know that there are other voices coming from our church.
That's Father Gary Meyer, and he has become one of the most forthright voices supporting gay Catholics since becoming one of just a handful of priests to publicly come out as gay himself. Now, Father Meyer came out earlier this month after publishing the second edition of his book, Hidden Voices, Reflections of a Gay Catholic Priest, a book he'd previously published anonymously, but now felt compelled to claim as his own. Why the change? Well, Father Meyer wrote in the Huffington Post, and I quote, "I have tried over the years to reconcile my silence as a gay priest with that of the Church's increasingly anti-gay stance, but I have been unsuccessful. I could not live as a gay priest, which means living in silence while publicly pretending to support the hierarchy's teachings on homosexuality. It is my great pleasure now to bring on Father Gary Meyer, whose once anonymous book is Hidden Voices, Reflections of a Gay Catholic Priest." Father, good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. What a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much, John, for having me.
And thank you. So, sir, you've been a priest for 15 years now. Why did you decide this was the time to come out publicly?
I get asked that a lot, John. I can say this in response to that question. St. Catherine of Siena once said that we need to speak the truth with 1,000 voices. It is silence that kills the world. And that's all I'm doing, is speaking the truth. The truth about homosexuality, the truth about what it means to be gay in our world today. And the truth about all people are beautiful, created by God, by love, for love.
Well, how have you been received by your former parishioners and, more importantly, by the hierarchy?
Great questions again. I've been received by people. I've gotten literally hundreds of emails from all around the world, mostly here in the United States, but in fact all around the world. Overwhelmingly supportive. I can count on one hand maybe 3 or 4 emails that have been, disdained or, unhappy with my decision to publish under my name. So the people are overwhelmingly supportive of this book, of what I'm saying, of the truth that I'm speaking.
Well, of course, there have always been gay priests, but not that many who've been able to come out as you've done. I'm wondering, how have your fellow priests responded to your announcement?
I get a ton of emails from priests and seminarians alike, including some bishops who are all in their emails. Some of them are anonymous and some of them aren't, but they are all, there's such a fear with coming out as a gay priest in today's church. And it's beyond just the fear of what people are going to say, but it's also the fear of loss of job security, possibly income, health benefits. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that make it a very scary thing to do.
Well, for those out there who don't understand the Catholic Church's doctrine, it's not forbidden to be a gay priest. It is highly irregular, of course, to be open about it, although you're not the first. Do you expect, sir, to remain a priest after this announcement?
I don't know. The Archdiocese here in St. Louis issued a statement that was pretty much neutral. It didn't, as far as statements, regarding this issue, it's one of the nicer ones. So I don't. It's hard to gauge what's going to officially come out of the Archdiocese of St. Louis in the weeks and months ahead.
Would you like to remain a priest?
I say this too as well to anyone who asks. If there's a way for me to remain a priest and minister to the LGBT community and to say what I believe to be the truth about homosexuality, then I'm in. Count me in.
That's brilliant. Well, Let me ask, do you think the church's biggest problem with your announcement would be that you are a gay man or that you went public about it?
I'm not sure that they would have an issue with either or. I know it's uncharted water when a gay priest comes out and says, hey, I'm gay. It just hasn't happened in this country much at all. In fact, probably not too much around the world, as far as I know. So I'm not sure that they would have an issue with either one of those. I think the issue that if there's going to be an issue, it's going to be on my view about homosexuality as recognizing that as a gift, not a curse. I don't believe homosexuality is a disease like alcoholism or gay marriage. I don't believe is a threat to world peace. Those are the kinds of things I think if the church is going to, if the hierarchy is going to have issue with what I've said, it's going to be in that area.
Of course. Well, here on Viewpoint, we consistently have tried to break down the various arguments, anti-gay arguments that some right-wing Christians have used to justify discrimination against our LGBT brothers and sisters. We are routinely knocking down Romans and Matthew 19, which have nothing to do with gay people. As you know, sir, I was raised the child of two ex-Catholic clergy. And for me, when I first moved to New York City, I went to the NYU Catholic Center. That was a church that actually openly welcomed gay parishioners. And I had never seen that before. I had never seen gay and lesbian couples not just going to church together, but openly welcomed and celebrated. Do you think there's much of a support system for gay Catholics in America today?
There is a support system for gay Catholics in the church today. It is hard sometimes to find depending on where you're at. In big metropolitan cities, there are gay communities within the Catholic Church that find support. All of that support, though, is limited and can only go so far. But there are communities and church communities here in St. Louis that are welcoming to LGBT members. But again, they can only officially go so far. They can welcome you to a point, and then if you want to take a leadership role in the church and get married as a gay person, you're not allowed to. You're going to get fired, lose your position, those kinds of things. And the church has changed quite a bit since I went through seminary. When I was a seminarian, these issues were not, it was just not an issue whether or not you were gay. And in fact, the theologians at the time were writing and discussing some of those things that you just discussed with Romans and some of the other scriptures. And there was a movement, and it seemed like there was the possibility, or at least the door was open, that the theology of the church could change or move more progressively in this area. Some of my earlier papers in morality class were done on homosexuality, as you might imagine. And the moral theologian at the time gave me authors to look up and research, and they were all authors who were Catholic theologians pushing the envelope on this issue. And that's changed in today's church. We are not even allowed to discuss these things, let alone write about them and publish theological writings about that.
Of course, yes, sir. Well, you know, for years, you were allowed to be a gay priest. The only issue was the celibacy law. And for many of us, one of the low points of Benedict XVI papacy was in 2005 when some members of the Vatican tried to blame the pedophile scandal on gay priests. And it was after 2005 that the church began moving for the first time to actively keep gay men out of the priesthood. But you wrote that when you were in seminary, you were frank about your sexuality when you were asked. Back then, what kind of responses did you get?
I got acceptance. Folks did not, and the people on the admissions committee and such, when they were asking me about my sexual orientation or asking about my sexual history, I gave all of that. I had nothing to hide. And they took that, and it was received. The question back then was, can you be celibate? You know, and back then I was pursuing this notion of priesthood seminary, and yeah, I think I can, was my response. And that was fine. That was not the issue. The doctrine that was issued in 2005 is, I believe it's a reinstatement of a doctrine that was issued back in the 1950s, but that had been widely ignored by bishops. They were ordaining gay men to the priesthood continually. It was not even an issue.
In 2002, Bishop Gregory spoke of U.S. seminaries as having what he called a, quote, homosexual atmosphere or dynamic that makes heterosexuals think twice about entering the priesthood. And he said there was an ongoing struggle to make sure the priesthood is not dominated by homosexual men. And that sounded a bit silly at the time. Do you, sir, see the Catholic priesthood in this century as dominated by gay men?
They're awfully quiet if it is.
Well, you also were...
If it is
Please, go ahead.
If it is dominated by gay clergy, they are certainly very quiet about that. That's not been my experience at all, and I haven't perceived any struggle in that regard either between the heterosexual priest and the gay priest. I just don't, that's not the way the brother priests that I've grown to know and love have ever operated under any sort of struggle.
It seems like it's just not that big a deal for most members of the faith, correct?
It is not that big of a deal. If you look at reports that have come out of Pew Research Center that do studies on what people in the pews believe, there's been a huge rise in the amount of lay people in the Catholic Church who once believed homosexuality was a sin, who no longer believe that. I think it's as high as 56% who no longer believe that homosexuality is a sin. And then 59% of Catholic laity support marriage equality as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, so who suffers the most, sir, from the Church's LGBT stance?
My opinion and what makes the driving force for the book and any other efforts I put forth with advocacy, it's the 30% of the teenagers. The 30% of the teenagers who successfully commit suicide based on their sexual orientation and sexual identity issues. Those are the people that are hearing these messages being spoken from the pulpit that I believe are harmful.
Well, when
harmful.
Well, of course, and you know, that's why it's incumbent upon so many Christians of goodwill to actually break down these barriers that, again, not to be a broken record, but have no real basis in New Testament scripture. And when Pope Francis himself was Cardinal of Buenos Aires, he supported civil unions during Argentina's same-sex marriage debate. Does that give you hope, sir, that in light of that, the Church may be moving forward on that issue in our lifetimes?
It's possible. If you pick up some of the reports that are done and that come out of the Vatican, there are various cardinals that I believe are saying something similar to that. And just almost as quickly as they say it, apparently, they're retracting some of that or softening it, some of it. But there is, you know, in the Catholic Church, we have never recognized civil unions of any of the Catholics that get married by the Justice of the Peace. We don't recognize that as a valid marriage, but we don't tell them they're a threat to world peace or that they're the work of the devil or that they're intrinsically disordered or that what they're doing is, you know, that whatever, defective in some way. We don't take that stance on all the non-valid marriages that people who have gone to the Justice of Peace. So it doesn't make sense to me that we would take that stance on this issue as well.
Well, then let me ask the million-dollar question. I'm pleased to see how much support you've gotten from Catholic folks here in the States, but if, sir, you wind up being suspended from your ministry, what do you do next?
That's a great question. I don't know, but whatever I will end up doing, whether I continue as a Catholic priest in ministry or whether I do something completely different, it will include advocacy for the LGBT community. In fact, I'm starting a website called risingvoices.net, and its purpose is just to capture the voices of faith who believe in the inherent dignity and equality of all people, regardless of who they love. risingvoices.net.
Father Gary Meyer is the author of Hidden Voices, Reflections of a Gay Catholic Priest. Father, thank you very much for your bravery, your advocacy, and for coming on Viewpoint tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you. The former head of National Public Radio now says hooray for the IRS and looking into the Tea Party. And he's going to join us coming up next.
You know who's coming on to me now? You know the kind of guys who do like reverse mortgage commercials? Those type.